pieces of a broken heart. There's days I wonder if you'll still be faithful. Hold me together when I fall apart. Would you remind me now of who you are? That your love will never change, that there's healing in your name, and you can take broken things and make them beautiful. You took my shame and you walked out of the grave, so your love can take broken things and make them beautiful. And make them beautiful. Oh, and make them beautiful. I'm better off when I begin to remember how you have met me in my darkest pain. So give me glimpses now of how you have covered all of my heartaches, or with all your grace. Remind me now that you can make a way, that your love will never change, and there's healing in your name, and you can take broken things and make them beautiful. You took my shame and you walked out of the grave, so your love can take broken things and make them beautiful. And make them beautiful. Oh, and make them beautiful.
Oh, I was invited to invite and welcome a good friend of ours. For those who don't know Phil and Mindy Steiner, they were the original youth directors of this church when it started some 11 years ago. Phil and Mindy broke off after about 5, 6 years and started a nonprofit organization called B2 Live, with the intention of serving young people in our community and in Mexico. Since they started, well, back here at the Quest, there's been some 2,000 people that have gone to Mexico on what we are calling service trips to a place called La Misión. From there, kind of branched out to other orphanages in Mexico. But many of you have kids that have gone on these trips. You know people in the community that have gone on these trips. From my experience working with Phil and Mindy over the years, and seeing my own child, who's now 23, and countless young people just be embraced by the love that Phil and Mindy have brought them into, and in a way to really serve a larger community in Mexico. And the orphanages that we go to, they also helped start a daycare center, which is thriving, and opened another location. I won't tell the whole story, but I sincerely want to welcome Phil and Mindy for coming today.
Tell you, it is exciting for me to be here, and I feel honored that Joe would ask me to come and share with you this morning and kind of our journeys and our learnings from what has happened to Mindy and I over the course of the last, 6 years or so. So just a brief history as to how we got to where we're at. So in 2003, Mindy and I were living in Indiana. In February 2003, we were invited to come to this place called Novato, California. We had no idea where it was on the map. Had to look it up. Knew it was in the San Francisco area. And remember, we were, again, Indiana. I know Joe's talked about Indiana before. Winters in Indiana. And so February, we're laying in bed the day before we're leaving, and Mindy and I are having this conversation. Why are we even going to California? We don't want to go to California. Because we were in the process of finding what was next for us, what kind of plan that God had for us. We just resigned from a youth organization, and Mindy goes, well, it's California. It's warmer than it is here. There's no snow, there's no ice, there's no wind. Let's just go. It's a free ride. So thank you for those who paid for that to happen. So we came out here, took things in, interviewed, and a few months later, after a lot of prayer, we said, you know what, this is what I think God's next steps are for us. So we landed here June 1st, 2003, and to start the youth ministry here, and it was just an amazing ride. And then in about 2000, so then in 2006, I know we're going way back. It doesn't feel like it was that long ago, does it? That's like 9 years ago. I'm like, whoa, where's the time go? So 2006, we do our first Mexico service trip to La Misión. And there were 19 high school students. I see some of the pictures up here on the wall. And there were 5, 6 adults. So there was Scott Steinmetz. He was the border between, he's a student and an adult at the same time. So Scott Steinmetz, Judge Taylor, Nancy Malone, Patty Taylor. I feel like I'm forgetting someone else. Candy? No, Candy wasn't on that trip. And then Mindy and I. And it was a great trip. 19 high school students. Hey, this is awesome. Let's do this again. So in 2007, we do it again. We have just around 40 high school students. And so 2006, we also did a family trip. 2007 did a family trip as well. And this thing started to grow and to grow. In the third year, we had like over 50, 60 students go. And like, what is going on here? Because a lot of these students who would go on these trips wouldn't come to our youth group, but they would go spend a week in Mexico. And we began to see the lives of these students that were changed. Their perspectives on life and on faith and on God were just shifted just enough that things started to change in their lives. And so in 2009, beginning of 2009, God started stirring in our hearts. Like, there's something more here. There's something going on here. We really began to feel as though God was saying, go start this thing and cast the net wider. And so in 2009, in a bittersweet, I remember standing here, in a bittersweet moment saying we were going to be leaving the Quest to start Be to Live. And it was, scary, sad, exciting. It was that whole mix. I'm sure we've all experienced those decision-making moments in our lives. They're just kind of this jumbled mix of like, oh my goodness, what are we doing here? And we jumped out on faith. And over the course of the past 6 years, I could tell you story after story how God has just continued to provide and to provide and provide. And moments we're going, I don't know if we're going to make it. And next thing you know, there's bread at our doorstep. Next thing you know, someone is paying for our tires on our truck. Someone, the mechanic that we take our car to, ends up paying for our car work, not even knowing what is going on. And just these amazing things that God started working out in our lives. And more students were getting involved. And lives were getting changed. And so this morning, I think it's awesome, this series that you're going through, learning to believe in your life again. Because I feel like there's a lot of things through what we have been doing with Be to Live that we've learned that really applies to this, of believing in your life again. Though I think it's maybe counterintuitive than what we may be used to hearing. And so this morning I want to challenge you maybe a different perspective, a different thought on seeing things. So I want to start with the story in Luke 19. Luke 19, I think it's up on the board. So Luke 19, the story of Zacchaeus. I'm sure we've heard this story before. If we haven't heard the story, follow along. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead, climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. You go to the next slide. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay it back 4 times the amount. So just a little background here. So Zacchaeus, chief tax collector. So tax collectors in those days, were hated people because the tax collectors not only were collecting taxes of the oppressive Roman government, but then they would also, this is how they got wealthy, they would extort people of money. So if the tax was 10%, they may charge 20% and put the other 10% in their pocket. And people knew that they were doing this, but they could do nothing to stop it. And so Zacchaeus was this man that was hated by people. But he was destroying his life, he was spilling it everywhere, and he was wreaking havoc on other people's lives, destroying their lives. And so Jesus comes into town, and the story doesn't really tell us why, but Zacchaeus, wanted to see who Jesus was. And whether he wanted to see, okay, so how much can I get money out of this guy? We're really not sure. But Jesus comes by, and he invites himself over. Have you ever invited yourself over to anyone's house? I know we have before. We said, hey, we're going to come for dinner. Or show up at someone's house, you just kind of hang out for a while. And just, no. So Jesus invites himself over. And we're not told what happens in the course of that conversation, but something happens to Zacchaeus. His mind has changed. His heart has changed. He realizes how he's living his life is not the best way. And instead of just stopping it and saying, okay, I'm not going to do it anymore, he justifies the situation. He makes it right. He says, you know what? I've screwed up here. I'm going to give half of everything I have, half of everything I have. Imagine if that's us making that decision. And that's hard. He gives half of everything to the poor. And then he goes one step further and says, for those that I've stolen money from, I'm going to give him back 4 times as much. I'm sure if he's stolen from me, I'm going, oh, hey, right here. But what happened there? Jesus goes on then and says, Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house because this man too is the son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Salvation has come. Salvation from what? I think what happened is Zacchaeus rediscovered his life, why he was here, what he was supposed to be doing. It wasn't supposed to be taking and acquiring and gaining more wealth. In fact, it was the opposite. It was to be given away. It was to be given to those that are on the underside of power, those he extorted. He was justifying and making things right where he had gone wrong. I think this is a huge cue into rediscovering our life or believing in our life again. These high school students that we take to Mexico, you know, our culture has good and bad things, and sometimes a good thing can go either way depending on how it's done. And so our students today are known as having more stress than their parents. They're under more pressure than their parents. There's surveys that show that. And I know within our culture, within Marin County, that the students that we work with, there's like this motto that many of them are up against. You have to get the best grades, get into the best college so you can make the most money. And it's the mantra over. Oh, you know what? A 4.0 is not good enough. Now you need a 4.8. I'm not sure how that happens. Oh, and you know what? You can't just go to school. You now have to be involved in extracurricular activities because that looks good on a resume, right? Oh, wait a minute. You also need to do service hours. And so everything for a student's life is all self-focused, all self-centered. And what we're beginning to discover with these students is that they see that that's how a lot of their parents have lived. And they go, you know what? That's how you live. And your life's not that great. And they go, I don't want that life. I want my life to have meaning and purpose. These students are valuing purpose and meaning over money. And I think that's awesome. Because this world needs more of that. And for these students to wrestle through that, so when we go for a week in Mexico, their eyes are off themselves. We spend the week living in relationship with God. We give every student a Bible, a time for solitude time in the morning to consider life and faith. And we take any high school student that wants to come. We don't say you have to believe this or do this or this. We say, if you're a high school student, come. You're all welcomed around the table. Share your views, your perspectives, your beliefs, because we believe that just develops a deep and rich conversation of where we can share life. So we live in relationship with God and try to figure out, okay, so what does this mean? What does this look like? And then we also live in relationship with the people we work with in these orphanages and in the canyon. And so we serve others. We love others. And then the third way is we do this in community with each other. So in the evenings when we come back, we have small group time. We share life together. We share meals together. And for this week, it's like a retreat. They're not thinking about themselves. But in the process, they discover who they are. They discover, oh, this is a meaningful life. This is what this looks like. And they want more of it. We have a high retention rate of students who go multiple times because that week is so refreshing and so focusing for them to go, you know, this is how I want to live my life. But service. And so I would say that why is service, sorry, I'm seeing all this up on the other screen, that service is, I think, a way of discovering who we are. What is the life that God intended? And if we read the scriptures, we see a lot of this idea of loving others, serving others, taking care of others. But why do you think, if you got down to the why, to the why, to the why does God say this is so important? Other than, hey, it feels good. Well, I think there's more to it. So the first idea I want us to think about is that when we serve others and we step into injustices in this world, we know who God is. And so in Psalm 9:16, it says this, the Lord is known by his acts of justice. This is how he is known. So justice, I know justice gets thrown around a lot, so I want to offer two similar definitions. Justice, for one, is giving to each what is owed. So if you think of a human being, just a person, regardless of what they've done, who they are, or anything like that, what is it that a human being should be owed? If you think of our Constitution, inalienable rights, right? Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, freedom, dignity, to be treated fairly. Those are just the basic, I guess you say, human rights. That is justice. Another idea that I really like is living in right relationship between you and God, between you and others, between you and yourself, because that relationship, if you're like me, needs work all the time, right? And all of God's creation. So if you think of those type of relationships, where, as like Zacchaeus at one point in that story goes, wait a minute, I'm not in right relationship with myself, I'm not in right relationship with you, Jesus, I'm not in right relationship with people. And so he starts to justify those situations. So is that making sense as justice goes? So he says, God says, I'm known by my acts of justice. Now, you may be wondering why there's a surfboard up here. I have grown to love to go surfing. And so I mentioned, when we came out here in February, I had some friends of mine. They weren't friends yet. I'm not sure why they're still friends, but which I'll explain a little bit. I'm kidding. It was a joke. They said, hey, have you gone surfing? I said, no, I've never gone surfing. I'm from Indiana. We're landlocked. We have Lake Erie. They don't really surf on Lake Erie. And so I said, do you want to go? I said, I'll try anything first. And so they take me out to this place called Palamarin. Now, you have Bolinas. So just north of Bolinas, if you go down this dirt road, there's a place called Palamarin in Point Reyes. And so I get out, get my wetsuit on, I get my surfboard, and nobody told me until I started walking this down a cliff, like a 100-foot cliff. So you have to, there's trails that are being washed away, there's a rope, you got to back down. You finally get down, and then now I'm standing on like a tide pool, like a reef. And how I remember it, and how this other person remembers it, is a little different. I remember like these 6-foot, 7-foot waves. These were huge for a first-timer. And so he gives me a few pointers and says, okay, this is how you do it, because he loves surfing, he surfs, his son surfed, and so you get into the water and I start paddling. Now, there's details to surfing that are important that I was not led on to. One is, how do you paddle? Okay, so you're laying down on the surfboard, and so I get in the water, these waves are crashing, and I'm paddling like this. I'm not going anywhere, and I'm doing this, and I turn around, my friend behind me is like, go! Like, I'm going, but I'm not going anywhere. This wave's crashing, so I ditch my board, dive under. Finally, I get to the outside. The other important thing, as I know he seems to tell you, is that your arms are tired after all that workout. I didn't think he'd be so tired paddling out, but it's probably more my fault than his. Like, of course, you're swimming out. So finally get to the outside. I'm just exhausted. And his son out there, all right, you ready to catch a wave? I said, no. No, let me recoup here for a little bit. I about died there. I don't remember how I got back. I may have blacked out on the way. But I made it back safely, obviously. And but it didn't scare me away. And in fact, when we moved out here, I started going surfing with him. And going surfing. I learned how to surf. But the point of it wasn't surfing, is I got to know who he was. Because he loved surfing. He was known by surfing. And through the car rides out to Bolinas and stints and different places that we would surf, I got to know this man. Now he's one of my mentors, one of the men that I look up to in my life. God is known by his acts of justice. So if we join God in his acts of justice, we will know who he is. So why serve? Why get involved? Because our eyes will be open to more fully who God is. That's one reason why. Because when we take these students to Mexico, we step into these orphanages. There's these children, these orphanages, there's no-cost daycare. We go to the old Tijuana dump, which we'll talk more about here in a moment. And we walk around the dump delivering food to these people that are just some of the poorest of the poor in Mexico. But we're joining God in what he's doing. And what's interesting is that in Scripture, there are about 2,100 verses that mention poor or poverty. Think about that. About a quarter of that 2,100, it talks about prayer. Something about the poor and poverty for God is important. And when we are there and these students are there, it's almost like you can almost touch and feel and you experience God in a different way. I feel like that's what these students come away with after they leave, like, man, I experienced God there like I've never experienced him before. And their view is widened. Their understanding of God is widened. Another reason why is empathy. You know, I feel like today we have so many social issues going on in our world that, you know, there's two sides of the fence, it seems like a lot of times. Sometimes there's a third side. But and a lot of times, I know for me, it's more easy to stand on one side of the fence and just throw grenades, and the other is like, hey, you're like this, hey, you're like that, without actually getting on the other side of the fence, putting my feet there and seeing life through their perspective. What is it like from there? So Galatians 6, 2 through 3 says, carry each other's burdens, and this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks, whoa, a little fast. Can you go back one? If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. This idea of carrying one another's burdens. If you ever walked with someone through a difficult time and you're sharing life together, you begin to see life from their perspective, don't you? The same thing is true when it comes to service, that when we step into someone's life and we walk with them, we serve, we see life differently. This has happened a few things. We went to part of our Mexico experiences now. We go to the border wall. So if you ever driven across the border from the U.S. into Mexico, the San Diego border, you drive along this fence. It's like a 15, 18-foot high fence. And there's barbed wire that's pointed towards Mexico. So it's obviously saying, keep out. You know, it's kind of, as you're driving there, you can see through the fence, you can see the skyline of San Diego, and to the left you see the dilapidated, rundown shanties of Tijuana. And it's just quite a perspective shift. And we go to a place where these people in Mexico have made this art piece of the fence. And so I just have a few pictures of it. It's after the Philippians verses. You get in there? So we go to this fence. Oh, there it is. So there's this wall, and each post, there's a post. So each post is like a triangle. So the flat part is to the United States, and the triangle side of it is to Mexico. So we're standing on the Mexico side. And if you look one way, you see one art piece. So here you see, like if you're looking to your right, you see the Mexico flag and the U.S. flag. And if you look the other direction, it's a different picture. And it's just amazing, just the art pieces. But people in Mexico have used this as a way to express how they feel about this wall. Now, this morning, I'm not making any political statements or anything like that, but it's important that when we serve people, we begin to see life from a different perspective. And so, like there's someone took the Matthew verse that says that what God has joined together, let no man separate. Someone other posted the wall of tears. There's another post that says the prison of the north. This flag that's upside down was done by a veteran, a United States military veteran who had been deported. He'd served for the United States and was deported back. And so he has this flag that's upside down. I think it's a sign of distress. And if you look the other way, you see the names of all the other servicemen who have been deported. And you kind of go, well, okay, what happened there? But service allows us to actually see life from a different perspective. Maybe some of the social issues we may not understand, whether it be racism or poverty or slavery, to actually go to where the injustice is happening and learn from the people who are waging justice. We begin to see life differently. The third way is that I think we discover who we are. We were created to serve others. There are 59 verses of these one another verses. So if you were to do a web search of one another in the Bible or in scriptures, there are at least 59 in the New Testament. So it's, you can barely see them, I'm sorry, you can bright enough, but peace with each other, wash one another's feet, love one another, love one another, love. I think God's trying to get something through to us. This idea of love one another. One another in the Greek is one word. Now, recently studying this, I'm not an English major. I don't claim to really be able to write very well. But one another is a reciprocal pronoun. Does anyone here, definitions up there now, but did anyone know what a reciprocal pronoun was before? Any English people in here? Good, I'm not alone. So, a reciprocal pronoun is a pronoun which is used to indicate that two or more people are carrying out or have carried out an action of some type, with both receiving the benefits or consequences of that action simultaneously. So there's this give and take. Love one another. And actually, I think that a lot of this charge is for the community of the church, the community of believers that love one another. One way as an example that I've seen in my own life is that, so I go to these high school events. So there's a cross country and track, and these two high school girls were running cross country meet at Drake. I went to see them a few times, and so I always position myself at places that I think are key, and yelling at them, "Hey, keep running, keep going, you're almost there." And as they run by me, well, one of the girls recently started a nonprofit called Free Beauty, and it is to combat slavery in India, to raise awareness and funds, because the sparkles in the cosmetics are mined by child slavery, not all of it, but a lot of it in India. And so they're bringing awareness to this. And so they set up this 5K race, and I said, yeah, I'll run in it. And so I was planning on running with Caleb, my son. And so we're just going to cruise along and have fun doing this. And then he finds a buddy and says, hey, I'm going to run with my buddy. And something about me. I ran cross country and track in college. And I cannot just run a 5K race. When the gun goes off or the whistle blows, whatever it is to start the race, my competitiveness just gets flipped. Whether I've trained or not, I'm all out. I'm like, I'm going to go win this race, or I'm going to get first in my age group. And so, very little training. I'm going as fast as I can, and I'm dying. I'm just dying because I hadn't trained. And about a half mile from the finish line, I come around this corner. I actually think about, I need to walk. I come around this corner, and there are those two high school girls that I had cheered on are now yelling at me. Keep going. Don't give up. You're almost there. That's the reciprocal pronoun. What I did for her and them, they were doing for me. This one another. And here God is imploring us to say, love one another. It is a give and take. It is a back and forth. And I believe this is why we were created. Other than, I think that God put us in this world because that's who He is. Let me back up. Let me rephrase that. If we want to know who God is, we look at Jesus. We look at who He was, what He taught, what He did. And Jesus, because Jesus is a self-revelation of God. He is God. And so as a result, when we look at Him and look what He said, we can learn who God is. And what do we learn about Jesus? Who was He as a person? He was born to parents who were homeless at the time. And here's the thing, I don't believe God does, even in the details of life, anything by accident or leave anything to chance. I think in the details of our life, they're there for a reason, and he's really involved with it. And so even with His birth, born to parents who were homeless at the time, born into poverty, He was born into oppression. The Roman government we talked about earlier is oppressing the Jewish people. Not long after he's born, Caesar finds out, there's supposed to be another king here, and he goes to wipe out all of the babies, and he becomes a refugee. The ethnicity of his skin was a threat to the Roman government. He eventually was killed by capital punishment. There's a lot there. We're not going to get into all of that. But I think what that says about Jesus is that He not only stood on the side of those who were on the margins, those who were being oppressed, but He said, I am one of them. And what did He teach? He said, love one another, serve one another. And Jesus is being the example that we are to follow, because I think that's why we were created. And when we live that way, when we serve, when we give our life away, we are living into the very people God created us to become. Javier, good friend of mine that I've gotten to know, maybe wondering what the heck this is. Javier and his family live in the old Tijuana dump. And so the old Tijuana dump is used to be an active dump. And so they would take the garbage from Tijuana and they would dump it there. And there are people there that would wait for these garbage trucks that would literally back up, start dumping the garbage, and they would stand behind the garbage truck trying to grab whatever they could for recycling or for food. And as a result, while this was active, there was a community that got built in shanties, plywood houses, whatever they could find, tarps, along this canyon. The dump is no longer active there. It's been moved to Tecate. But there's still a community of people that live there, and many of the men still go to the Tecate dump to find what they can. And so Javier here is in the middle. This is his family. He has 4 kids. He has a 5th on the way. He lives in the dump. And one day, I was walking with him up this hill, and you can smell the methane gas and the garbage, and he just takes a deep breath. I wouldn't take a deep breath, but he takes a deep breath. He sighs. He goes, I am blessed. And in my mind, I'm going, blessed? You live in a dump, literally. He goes, I am blessed. I go, well, why are you blessed? He says, I get to serve my people. He calls everyone who lives in the canyon my people. He says, I get to take you guys around. I get to serve you guys to show you my people. There's a church that's right in the middle of the canyon that every morning serves hot breakfast to children on their way to school. There's a school that's right at the top of the canyon for these children. In the school, if you look out one window, you see the cemetery. Out the other window, when the dump was active, they would be able to see their parents going through the garbage. And now they can see where the old garbage heap is at. Here's a picture of it. And that's the vision of their life and their future. But Javier there serves these children in the canyon. And he has this joy inside of him that I want that. And you have nothing tangible. What is it that he has? And when you listen to him, it's because he serves. He loves others. He gives his life away. He finds garbage and he makes art. That song this morning, Making Us Beautiful. I mean, I think it's what God does. He's made this big one, and so there's a bartering that happens. He also finds, he makes these smaller ones like this. I haven't asked him yet why scorpions, because I guess there's a lot of scorpions in the garbage. I don't know, but he sells these things to people who come and visit and help. And because part of, if you volunteer with his organization to go, and we deliver these community boxes to people, there's food and some of the staples of life, they know that they're not going to get one because they want people serving for the right reasons, not because they get something. So Javier has led us around, and the director says, you're not supposed to give him one. And they know that, and that's fine. And that's the other thing for us, is that we work with an organization there that's building relationships with people. It's not like we drop in, oh, hey, you look poor. This organization is building relationships, and they know where to go and what to do, which is a huge value of ours. And so, anyways, he sells these things to high school students, and once the high school students begin to hear him and know him, they just fall in love with this man and his family. And he was telling me a story as we were on this walk. He says, yeah, the other day I had $10 extra. Extra? He said, yeah, we had food, and I didn't know what to do with it. And in my mind, I go, well, you're going to save it, so that way you can get more money, so you can buy more stuff, so you can get out of here. He said that night there was a knock at my door. And there was a person there who said, we're hungry, we don't have any food, we don't have any money. He's like, oh, God, that's why you gave this to me. And gives them the $10. How is a man who has what I would consider tangibly, nothing, have so much joy? This summer I asked him when I saw him, I said, hey, Javier, how are you? And he says, contento. Content. He doesn't hide the fact that it's not a difficult life. He says, yeah, it's hard here. It is very hard. But he has this joy, and I would argue it's because he gives his life away. He serves others. Last thought on this, on healing, or on why we serve others. We serve others because it's a way of knowing God. It's a way of getting empathy and a different worldview on things. It's why we were created. And the other reason is it brings healing and joy. I think we need to balance when we've been hurt and we've been harmed with, yes, we do need to do the work of inside and of healing, But we also need to step out and serve others, because when we serve others, I think it brings healing, and we discover joy. And here's the reason why I believe this, is the orphanage we go to, Door of Faith Orphanage. We've been going there for, what is it now, 11 years? 2006, 9 years? And just love this place. Door of Faith Orphanage is home to approximately 100 to 120 children. Just depends on the week, the day. As they have adoptions, they have babies, they get dropped off. One of the few places that within Baja that will accept babies, and so they get newborns. And but this orphanage, they treat their children like family. When they get to 18, they don't just kick them out. Then if a student wants to continue their education, they'll pay for their college education. So, I mean, they treat their children like family, like you would treat your children. But if anyone feels as though they should be the victim in life, if the world should owe them anything, it would be these children. They've been abandoned, they've been thrown away, they've been abused physically and sexually, they've been just like cast aside. And they find themselves here in this orphanage. They have 4 big pillars. One is education, one is family. They go to church together, and then guess what they do? They serve their community. They go out and they build houses of people in the community. On Christmas, the thing they get most excited about is not the gifts they get, but they then go to other orphanages and deliver gifts. They serve others. And it's healing, because they realize that I'm not the victim. Actually, I have a purpose here. I have a meaning here. There's a reason why I'm here. And they give their life away. It's awesome because when we take our students down there, many times the high school students, the orphanages, are working alongside our high school students. It's awesome. And when we go, we don't go under the pretense like, well, we have and you don't. We go under the pretense of like, actually, you have. We're coming to learn. We're coming to serve. We're not the heroes here. And in fact, you guys are. Because to me, I feel like they have it more together than I do. And every time I go, I learn more. I'm encouraged more. And Jesus says that in John 14, that when you follow my commands, you will find complete joy. In John 15, he says this, I've told you this, back up, John 15:9. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Now remain in my love. If you keep my commands, you will remain in my love, just as my Father has kept my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this so that, why? My joy may be complete. Being complete meaning needing or not wanting anything else. We saw the 59 commands, right? Love one another, serve one another. When we do this, I think we will experience a deep joy as well and healing. But what's interesting is that Jesus didn't stop there. You know, love your neighbor as yourself. Great command, way we should live. But Jesus takes this another notch. So in John 13, he says, this is Jesus. So right after the Last Supper, so they had the last meal together. He just washed their feet, and Judas is just left to go betray him. It's like Jesus leans in and says, all right, guys, listen, this is important. A new command I give you. Love one another. And I'm sure there's times, hey, I've heard that before. Yeah, you've said it a lot. Love one another. But he goes to the next level. As I have loved you. What has Jesus done that takes us to the next level? Jesus gave up his life. If you look at, I think Joe sent out Philippians 2 this week as something to read, but I just want to touch on it here real quick before we wrap up. Philippians 2, verse 5, Jesus says this, in your relationships with one another, again, justice, being in right relationships with one another. Have the same mindset of Christ Jesus, who being in the very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, being found in the appearance as a man. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. He gave it up. He gave his life away. And he says, go do the same thing. Let me tell you, I don't have that figured out. I want to get there. I want to live a life that is self-sacrificing because I want to experience that deep joy. to actually go, all right, God, all I have is yours. Could I get to a point where I could get 50% of my stuff away to the poor? It's a little uncomfortable. But I challenge us to live into that way and to give your life away. DJ, the director of the orphanage, had a huge furniture business in Los Angeles and San Francisco. Spent a weekend in Mexico, and God changed his life. And he gave it all up and moved to this orphanage, Door of Faith Orphanage. And he would say, you know what? I didn't lose my life. I found my life. The Matthew 16:24. Jesus said to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciples must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. Whoever loses their life for me will find it. I want to encourage you this morning. I know there's a lot going on within our lives. Probably a lot of hurt, a lot of pain. Find those moments of service as you go about your day. Step into those opportunities that you may have to actually get involved with the people who are on the margins or who are poor, who are being oppressed, who are being mistreated. Step into their life. Carry their burdens with them. I love Frederick Buechner, because sometimes you go, what am I supposed to do? I want to serve. Frederick Buechner has this quote, the place God calls you to is a place where your deepest gladness and the world's deepest hunger collides or meets. What's the thing that brings you the most joy, the most happiness? And then go out and look for where's the place in the world that has the deepest hunger, that your deepest gladness can meet. Because I think that's where you will discover more of your life. God, thank you for who you are, who you created us to be and to become. Thank you that you're always patient with us. And Lord, I pray that you would help us find places to give our life away. And Lord, that it won't be just an act, but it will be a way of living, a way of life. And so, God, I pray that you would guide our steps as we move through life. In Jesus' name, amen. Just want to, as they come up, share one last thing. We have a table out back, Be to Live. Just to give you a brief overview, and I didn't get this at the beginning, but we equip students to make a vital difference in the world with the vulnerable. We do this with service trips to Mexico. We are now offering, if you're interested, a trip to Ghana, West Africa, to learn about, and you actually step into modern-day slavery, the fishing industry over there that has these boys 8 to 12 years old that are fishing 16 hours a day. And to learn from organizations there that are doing justice and rescuing these boys and rehabilitating them. And so we have information about that. We also have a leadership academy that we are in the process of helping these students discover who they are while getting involved in human trafficking and slavery. And so we're helping them uncover those things. And then we have a goal by 2017 to launch a gap year program. So it's a program for high school students who graduate from high school who are not sure, okay, I'm not sure who I am, what I want to do yet, to provide them a 9-month program to uncover, like we talked about this quote, to uncover where their deepest gladness is, who they are, while at the same time going to Ghana, sitting in there, going to Mexico, going to poverty and immigration, what's going on there, going to Oakland, learning about racism and poverty, what's going on there, and help these students so by the time they leave, they can discover where God's calling them, to get involved within this world and to give their life away. And it's been amazing to see how students have gone through our program. One, just tell you two quick stories. 3. Paulina recently had gone through our program, went through our leadership academy, is now at Boston University studying international relations. And she's getting involved with the Syrian refugee crisis. She's getting involved, she wants to help in slavery. But she sees her life as something to be given away. Another young lady, Ellen, who's at UC Davis, who's getting a psychology degree because she wants to get involved with aftercare of girls who've been sex trafficked in our Bay Area. This is just a window into what is happening in these students' lives as they experience God through these Mexico service experiences in our leadership academy. And so, and Joe said I could do this. So if you feel led and want to financially support us, that'd be great. If you want to get on our newsletter, We can sign up in the back as well. And then there's another, and then we have these house parties coming up that if you wanted to come and hear more about who we are and what we do, we'd love to have you join us in that as well. So, but thank you guys so much this morning. It's been an honor and a privilege for me to be here, to be back to kind of where we started. This is where Be to Live, God is Genesis. And so for all of you that have supported us, prayed for us, encouraged us, you know, it means a lot to us. And it's good to be here. We miss you guys. And just want to, again, thank you for this morning.
I know that I don't bring a lot to the table, just little pieces of a broken heart. There's days I wonder if you'll still be faithful, hold me together when I fall apart. Would you remind me now